Happy Wednesday! How are you all doing? Are you enjoying reading this week? I'd love to know what books you're enjoying. Do let me know. I love finding out what you're all reading. Today, I thought I'd do a book from this series. It's number 6, Chelsea Walk. And it's a thought-provoking series. And there are 6 different books. And it's all based in a fictional house in London, and it all has a main female lead all the way through. Okay, so it's about basically the women that live in this house. We've got girls with a voice, girls with courage, girls behind the camera, girls sort of vote where she wants to join the suffragettes. We've got girls at war and girls on the up. So these are the ones. And when you read through, you'll recognise a few of the famous names in there as well. So I'm going to do, which one shall I do? I'm going to do Girls with a Voice. So again, as I say, it's set in 6 Chelsea Walk. And this one is dated 1764. So there's various different years throughout. So there's a little map of the house. There we go. So, Chapter 1, Girls with a Voice by Anne Turnbull. Chapter 1, A New School. Mary Ann had read Mrs. Neave's advertisement card so many times and with such happy anticipation that she knew it by heart. Mrs. Neave's boarding school for young ladies. A genteel riverside establishment in the village of Chelsea, having the advantage of clean air and proximity to the countryside, and yet within 4 miles of the city. Parents may be assured that every care is taken of our pupils and attention paid to their manners and behaviour at all times. Young ladies are taught English, French, arithmetic, geography, needlework, deportment and dancing, with the opportunity to take lessons in singing and harpsichord at a small extra cost, 21 guineas a year. Singing and harpsichord lessons! Mary Ann could imagine nothing she would like more. And that small extra cost could easily be borne by her father, who spared no expense if it would further his children's advancement in the world. Her mother had visited Mrs. Neave's establishment and pronounced it was suitable, and today, 30th of April, 1764, Mary Ann was to leave home. She looked out of the window and glimpsed, between rooftops and chimneys, the Thames busy with small boats. Soon she would be there, on the river, on her way to Chelsea. Now that the moment had come, she felt a real rush of affection for her home, for her family and servants. The old dog Bullet with his unsteady waddle and adoring eyes, the familiar streets of the city. Her elder sister Harriet tapped at the door and came in. "I see you are dressed and ready." She joined Mary Ann at the window. "Are you nervous?" "Yes. It would be strange to be away from home, sharing every moment with other girls, and what would those girls be like? Most of them would be older than her. Refined, elegant young ladies," Mrs. Neave had told her mother. "Will they all be very grand, do you think?" "Of course not. They'll be girls like you. You'll soon make friends." Harriet smiled. She smiled often these days. Her own school days were behind her, and she had recently become engaged to be married. Mary Ann thought her fiancé, Mr. Philip Brown, rather old and dull, but she supposed Harriet must like him. Certainly Harriet liked the prospect of having a home and servants of her own. "We'll write to each other," said Harriet. "Yes, and I'll write to George." Her brother was at a boarding school in Hertfordshire. They were close in age, and she missed him. "Mary Ann!" Her mother's voice sounded from the floor below, and Amy, their lady's maid, came back into the room to check Mary Ann's dress and hair before allowing her downstairs to be inspected. Could you imagine doing that every day? The sisters went down together to the drawing room, where her mother was waiting. "Oh," she explained, "how grown up you look, Mary Ann." Mary Ann's fair hair was drawn back from her face and arranged in neat curls. Her blue cotton gown, expensive but not showy, as befitted a merchant schoolgirl daughter, was worn over a hooped frame, and this, together with stays boned at front and back, forced her to stand up straight under her mother's scrutiny. Her mother turned around and nodded approvingly. "Yes, you'll do. And now we must go. Tom is waiting downstairs with your trunk." They all went out into the courtyard. The servants, Sarah and Betty, came out to wish Mary Ann well, and Harriet kissed her goodbye. Bullet wagged his tail and pushed a damp nose against her hand. Her father, who went out early to the coffee house to do business, had already said his farewell. Now their serving man Tom lifted the trunk, and the three of them set off to the short walk to the landing stage at the Old Swan Stairs. Tom soon found them a boatman and helped both mother and daughter aboard. The boat rocked alarmingly as Mary Ann stepped in, and it was no easy task to arrange her hooped skirts around herself as she sat down. She knew that getting in and out of boats and carriages gracefully was one of the many skills she would be expected to learn at Mrs. Neave's school. She pulled a wrap around her shoulders as the boat moved out into the centre of the river. They left the city and travelled west, passed in Whitehall, Westminster and the Houses of Parliament. Then came a great bend in the river. The buildings on the shore were less densely packed, and she began to see fields beyond them. Mary Ann thought that they must be nearly there, but it seemed an age before the boatman pulled in at a small landing stage on a tree-lined bank, and she saw beyond it a road with a row of tall terrace houses facing the river. "There is Chelsea Walk," said her mother. They disembarked and climbed the shadow steps to the road, Tom following with the trunk. Mrs. Neave's establishment was at number 6, a large 5-storey house of red brick with tall wrought iron gates. Mary Ann looked up. She had an impression of many rows of windows, all watching her as she shook down the crumpled layers of her skirts and began to pick her way across the muddy road. Beyond the gates was a short garden and a flight of steps leading to the front door. Her mother took her hand and squeezed it. She led Mary Ann through the gateway and up the steps and knocked at the door. A maid, a dark-eyed, handsome girl, let them into the hall and then went to fetch her mistress. Mary Ann stood on the black and white tiled floor and looked around at the lofty space. The hall was panelled in wood, and there were several closed doors, one with a murmur of voices behind it, and an archway leading to the back where a great staircase with polished wooden boards led up to a tall window on the half landing, then turned and carried on upwards. She felt very small. "Mrs. Gifford!" "Mrs. Neave!" A woman about of her mother's age had appeared. She was dressed in dark blue silk and looked, Mary Ann thought, rather severe compared to Mamma in her striped yellow gown and little tilted straw hat. The two women nodded politely to each other. "And Mary Ann," said Mrs. Neave, turning to her, "welcome to our school." Mary Ann made a small, nervous curtsy. "You will take tea, Mrs. Gifford, before you return to the city?" Her mother accepted, and Mrs. Neave called to the maid, "Tea, Jenny, in my office, and tell Mrs. Gifford's man to take the young lady's trunk to the rear entrance." Jenny disappeared into the back area of the building. Nearby, in the hall, a door opened and several girls of about Mary Ann's own age came out, carrying books. Mrs. Neave stopped one of them, a friendly-looking girl with auburn curls. "Sophia, this is Mary Ann Gifford. Mary Ann, Sophia Hammond." The girls nodded at each other, and Mary Ann felt Sophia's eyes taking in every detail of her appearance. "Sophia will take you around the school and show you where you are to sleep. But first, say goodbye to your mother." Mary Ann turned to her mother. She wished they did not have to say goodbye so publicly. Her mother's eyes were pink as if she was holding back tears, and Mary Ann felt her own eyes pricking. She submitted to a brief kiss and then stepped brusquely away. "You'll be home for Whitsun," her mother said, as if to reassure herself. "Now be sure I hear well of you, and write to us." "I will," said Mary Ann, retreating, aware that Sophia was observing the exchange with interest. When the other girl moved away, Mary Ann was glad to follow her and leave the two women to discuss finance over their tea. Sophia waved a hand at the room as she had just left, and from which people were still coming out. "The downstairs rooms are the main classrooms, and the dining room is in there too." She briefly opened a door across the hall, and Mary Ann saw 2 tables. That room at the back is the office, where your mother is taking tea. Let's go upstairs. I'll show you the music room. Exclaimed Marianne. A music room? Do you like music? I do. It's quite my favourite occupation. I'm to have harpsichord and singing lessons. Sophia looked pleased. I have music lessons too. Mrs. Corelli is our singing teacher, and Mr. Ashton teaches the harpsichord. She walked ahead of Marianne around the turn of the grand staircase, and Marianne thought what a big house this was, through rather dark and old-fashioned with its unpainted wood panelling. Most of the rooms on this floor are dormitories for the older girls, said Sophia, but over here is the music room. No one was in the room, so they were able to look around. There were shelves of books, music stands, flutes and other wind instruments, and a harpsichord. Do you have an instrument at home? Asked Sophia. A virginal. There is no space for anything bigger, but my sister and I both play. Sometimes Mr. Ashton pays for us, says Sophia. He is a wonderful musician and quite divinely handsome. Half the older girls are in love with him. She sighed theatrically. But he's married, and quite old, 28 at least. My sister's fiancé is 28, said Marianne. Oh, your sister is getting married? When? Next year, or the one after. And is she greatly in love? Marianne frowned. I don't think so. But Mother says love is not to be recommended and that girls may do better without it. I shall insist on being in love when I marry, said Sophia. I don't think I want to marry at all, said Marianne. Sophia's eyes opened wide. But you would not want to be a spinster? I want to be a singer at the opera. Marianne did not often tell anyone this, for it was difficult to convey how strongly she wished it. But Sophia seemed to invite confidences. She added, Of course my parents say it's not a respectable profession. But you might catch the attention of a lord and marry him. Several famous singers have. Think of that. She went on to ask Marianne about her family and to talk about her own, her 2 younger brothers and baby sister, their house in Holborn, their spaniel. Come upstairs, she said. I'll show you our room. Your trunk should be in there by now. They went up yet another flight to another panelled hall full of closed doors. These rooms at the front are Mrs. Neave's own apartment, said Sophia, and Mrs. Corelli has this room by the stairs. Our dormitory is here. It's above the music room. She opened a door into a plain room with 4 beds neatly made, a few chairs and a washstand with a jug, bowl and mirror. Marianne's trunk was standing in front of the fireplace. Your clothes go in that cupboard by the door, said Sophia. She eyed the trunk. And Marianne knew she wanted to be there when it was opened. She saw that the bed in the far corner seemed to be hers. The others had chairs or shelves with small things, a prayer book, a handkerchief, a locket on them. Who else sleeps here? She asked. Lucy Stanley over there. Sophia indicated a bed set a little separate from the others, in the space behind the door. And Phoebe Morel, here, next to me. You may have the corner bed. We are the youngest girls in the school. Lucy and I are 13. We have been here since January, and Phoebe is 12. She came a few weeks ago. How old are you? 12, said Marianne. 13 in September. Sophia smiled. We shall all be great friends, I'm sure. Phoebe, well, everyone likes Phoebe. And Lucy is our clever one. We are quite in awe of her. She glanced again at Marianne's trunk. You should unpack soon or your clothes will be creased. I'll show you where they go. She opened a cupboard beside the door, revealing shelves and a few hooks for hanging clothes. Most of the space was taken up by full-skirted gowns and petticoats. There are 2 hooks there, said Sophia, and those lower shelves. Cloaks and hats go in the other cupboard. Have you brought much? No. Marianne lifted the lid of her trunk. Her night chemise lay on top and she removed it and laid it on her bed. Sophia watched as she took out her 2 cotton gowns, several chemise stays and a gown of pale green silk with a yellow underskirt, for occasions. She explained, wondering if there would be any. Sophia stroked the silk admiringly and found a place for it in the cupboard. You might wear that if we go to Ranelagh Gardens, she said. Ranelagh? To the pleasure gardens? Mary Ann could scarcely believe that she might go there. She had heard all about Chelsea's famous Ranelagh Gardens, where concerts were held on summer evenings in the rotunda, with a roof so that it may be used even in bad weather, her sister had said, and where the gentry come to mingle and be seen. Mrs. Neve likes to take some of the girls to a concert there each summer, said Sophia. Oh, I should so love to be there. Have you ever been? No, but the older girls tell me it is not to be missed. From far below came the sound of someone ringing a bell. Dinner, said Sophia, also not to be missed. Come and meet the others. There we go. As I say, that's a little introduction, chapter 1 for Girls with a Voice. And they are sort of from age range about 9 to 12. But actually, I've rather enjoyed a couple of these myself. So there we go. That's today's. Hope you have a fantastic day. And I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Bye.